Thank you for being here. Before we begin, just take a breath and settle in for a moment. This is one of those stories that reveals itself slowly, piece by piece, and it is best experienced without knowing too much ahead of time. So I will not say much. Just listen closely, stay with the voices, and let the story unfold in its own way. I hope it keeps you curious all the way through. Karen Vale hung below the dropship like a bruised furnace world, all dark ridges and pale mineral storms moving in slow bands over broken basalt plains. Ronan Vale sat strapped into the crash seat nearest the side hatch, gloves resting on his knees, and watched the landing feed jitter as gravity shear twisted the descent path by a few meters at a time. He was here as a contracted extreme environment survival specialist, at least on paper. His immediate job was simple to say and hard to survive. Get the team to Anchor Port 9 alive. Reach Black Rift extraction belt. Recover Director Selvek Dorn before the window closed. The pilot cursed under his breath when the deck dipped left, then rose so sharply that one armored escort slammed a shoulder plate against the restraint frame. Ronan felt the pull change his chest before the warning light flashed, and that told him more than the briefing file had. The gravity maps were wrong. Captain Ilyasarin stood 2 rows ahead with one hand braced on an overhead rail, jaw tight as she read the flickering descent line. She had the kind of stillness that made other people lower their voices, but the ship shook again, and even she had to shift her stance to avoid the bulkhead. "Pilot, how far off are we?" "Within tolerance if this world stops trying to swallow us," the pilot said. "Which it will not." Ronan leaned toward the near side screen and watched dust streams bend in opposite directions over the same ridge line. The pattern repeated, broke, then returned with a shorter rhythm. He spoke without raising his voice. "Your chart is delayed by at least 1 cycle." One escort turned toward him with a quick glare. Bright Alliance strike insignia flashed on his shoulder, and his expression said he hated passengers correcting trained crews. "You got that from one bad camera feed?" Ronan met the man's eyes for half a second, then looked back at the screen. "No, I got it from how your stomach felt before the warning chimed." The escort looked ready to answer, but the ship dropped hard enough to cut him off. A loose equipment case slammed against its latch, and the pilot swore again as the hull groaned. Captain Saren looked over her shoulder at Ronan. "Can you call the next shift?" Ronan watched the ridge pattern for another breath. He counted vibration pulses in the seat frame with his fingertips, then looked at the pilot. 30 degrees starboard in 3 seconds. Then ease down and hold. Do not fight the second pull. The pilot gave him a quick look that mixed annoyance with hope. "If you are wrong, contract man, we die ugly. If I am wrong, we die fast." The pilot snorted once and changed the line. The dropship lurched, hung for one impossible beat, then slid through a cross pull that would have rolled it if the pilot had fought it. The hull rattled, alarms spat warnings, and then the descent stabilized enough for the cabin to breathe. No one thanked Ronan. He did not expect them to. Anchor Port 9 rose through the dust as a ring of pressure towers and cargo pylons braced against black stone. Flood lamps cut white bars through mineral haze, and the port looked less like a city than a machine dug into the planet to keep people from being shaken loose. Captain Saren keyed the ship-wide line. "Final approach. We land. We move. We keep formation. Director Dorn is priority 1. We do not engage local security unless forced." Ronan leads route assessment once boots are down. The escort who had challenged him looked back again. "Convenu promotion." Captain Saren did not turn. "It is not a promotion, Sergeant Pell. It is math. If he can read this world faster than our charts, he walks first." The ship touched down hard enough to grind metal teeth into stone. Heat and dust hissed over the hull. Locks clanged open, and the side hatch dropped in a harsh light and airborne grit that tasted metallic even through filters. Ronan stepped down last from the first file and crouched for 1 second on the ramp to feel the pull through his boots. Karen Vale always introduced itself the same way on first contact. It did not hit. Like one heavy hand, it shifted, nudged, and then dragged at the body from an angle that turned one wrong step into a broken limb. He looked up at the nearest pylon supports. Fresh scrape marks, New braces and emergency welds told the story quickly. Someone had been losing hardware to unstable pulls recently, and the port had not told the Alliance team. A convoy of local carriers waited beyond the pressure gate, flanked by men and women in matte black mining security armor. Their commander stood a few paces ahead without a helmet, broad-shouldered and square-faced, expression almost polite in the way some people smiled before a search. Marshal Vec Turan. Ronan recognized him from the file image, though the file had not captured the broken capillaries in one eye or the relaxed confidence in his stance. Vec stood like the port belonged to him more completely than it belonged to the consortium. Captain Saren approached with 2 escorts and stopped just inside conversation range. Marshal Turan. Captain Ilias Saren, Alliance Retrieval Security. We are here under emergency recovery authorization. Vec Turan placed a hand over his chest in a gesture that looked ceremonial and empty at the same time. Welcome to Karen Vale, Captain Saren. Anchorport 9 is honored by the Alliance response. We regret the circumstances. Vec's gaze moved to Ronan and paused. And this is your environmental consultant. Ronan Vale, Captain Saren said. Contracted specialist. Vec's mouth moved in what could have been a smile. Then we are fortunate. The weather has become uncooperative. Ronan watched the marshal's boots. Local soles, heavy grip, dust pattern concentrated along the inner tread. Vec had come from the lower cargo ramps, not the command deck. That meant Vec had checked something first, or meant someone Vec did not trust subordinates to handle. Vec gestured toward the waiting carriers. We have prepared a secured route to Black Rift Extraction Belt. My people will escort yours through approved transit corridors. Certain sectors are unstable and temporarily closed. Approved by whom? Sergeant Pell muttered. Vec heard him and answered anyway. By the people who do not want your team buried under 10,000 tons of shifting or... Captain Saren held the line. We will review your route against our own charts. Vec's eyes flicked to the dropship, then to the dust bands moving over the port walls. Of course, though your charts may be older than this hour. For the first time since landing, Ronan felt a thread of interest instead of only caution. Vec was testing reactions and speaking just plainly enough to look helpful. Men like Vec usually preferred pressure they could deny later. The convoy moved within minutes. 2 local carriers in front, one Alliance transport in the middle, another local carrier behind, then a final Alliance truck with the rear security team. Ronan sat forward near the driver in Captain Saren's transport and watched the route feed on a compact screen while real terrain slid past through armored glass. The secured route began as an elevated cargo spine over fractured basalt, with old lift shafts dropping into darkness on both sides. Flood towers marked safe crossing points, but Ronan noticed several lights were dark and had been for days, maybe weeks. He tapped the screen. Stop at the next support. The driver looked to Captain Saren in the rear seat. Captain Saren gave a short nod. The transport braked. Vec's lead carrier rolled 20 meters ahead before slowing and turning back in a spray of black grit. Sergeant Pell leaned forward from the opposite bench. What now? Ronan stepped down onto the cargo spine and crouched near a support seam where dust had gathered in a narrow crescent. He pinched it between 2 fingers and let it fall. Instead of dropping straight, the dust drifted sideways for a heartbeat, then snapped down hard. Ronan looked at the tower shadow crossing the bridge. The cycle was shorter here than the route file showed. He stood and walked to the bridge railing. One local worker on a maintenance rung below looked up, startled, then quickly looked away when Vec's people shouted at the worker to clear off. Ronan asked without looking back, how many heavy carriers crossed this section in the last cycle? No one answered. Ronan turned to Vec, who had stepped from his vehicle and now stood with his arms loose at his sides. You know this bridge is in a sheer overlap. Vec spread one hand. Every bridge on Karen Vale is in something unpleasant. This one is in a live overlap with a delayed rebound. Your safe corridor marks it green. Captain Saren stepped closer. Marshal, Vec sighed as if they were all victims of a clerical inconvenience. The corridor was green this morning. Conditions. Change. Ronan watched the bridge deck. A ripple moved through the support rails, almost too small to see. Move everyone off the center span now. Sergeant Pell looked around the empty bridge and then back at Ronan. There is no one on the center span. A shout cut across him. One local cargo handler had emerged from a side hatch with a tool crate and was jogging across the bridge toward the rear maintenance post. The worker was halfway across when a pole changed. The worker's left foot slipped, the body twisted, and the crate ripped free and vanished through the gap between rail supports. The worker went with it. Ronan ran before the others fully understood what happened. The next pull struck from the side and tried to throw him offline, but he had already angled his weight into it. He hit the railing, dropped to one knee, and drove an arm through the lower gap just as the worker's harness snagged on a bent cable. Metal screamed. Ronan felt the full drag through his shoulder. The worker kicked once in blind panic, which made the cable slide. Ronan locked his wrist deeper and shouted without turning. Counterpull in 2 breaths. Grab my belt, not my arm. Captain Saren was there first. Sergeant Pell grabbed next, then another escort. The pull shifted again, lighter for a fraction of a second, and they hauled the worker up hard enough to slam the worker flat against the deck. Ronan released the harness and rolled onto his back. Dust covered his sleeve, and his shoulder burned, but the joint held. The worker gasped through a cracked faceplate and stared at Ronan with the stunned look of someone who had already accepted death. Vectron arrived a beat later, too late to help and early enough to take control. Get him to the clinic. Vex snapped at local security, then turned to Captain Saren with irritation sharpened under the politeness. This is why we restrict movement. Ronan pushed himself up and looked directly at Vec. No, this is why you do not call unstable corridors safe. For a moment the air between them felt heavier than the planet. Then Vec's expression smoothed again. Your consultant is useful, Captain. I am glad you brought him. They resumed the route, but the tone inside the transport changed. Sergeant Pell stopped making comments. Captain. Saren shifted to face Ronan more directly. How bad is it? Ronan flexed his shoulder once and watched the next ridge line. Bad enough that someone is updating safety maps late or not at all. Worse if that is intentional. You think it is? Ronan kept his eyes on the terrain. I think Karen Vale does not make this many profitable mistakes by accident. Captain Saren studied him for a long moment. We get Director Dorn and leave. Anything beyond that is for investigators. Ronan watched dust peel off a ridge in 2 directions at once. If Director Dorn is what this is really about. The convoy entered the outer settlements of Black Rift Extraction Belt near local dusk, though Karen Vale's light never softened enough to look like evening. Worker blocks were stacked in pressure-sealed rows against retaining walls, with vent towers pumping mineral haze into filtration units that sounded like tired lungs. Children moved between doorways in weighted boots, too big for them, while adults watched the convoy pass from behind scratched visors and patched masks. No one looked surprised to see armed escorts. That told Ronan more than the official briefing had. They stopped at a checkpoint plaza where a field clinic operated under reinforced canopy shields. The Alliance team was granted a short humanitarian review, while local security verified transit clearance to enter sectors. Vex said it like a courtesy and waited for them to object. Captain Saren accepted because refusing would cost time in a different way. Mira Quell met Ronan near the clinic intake line as Mira stripped one glove and scanned a worker's wrist with a handheld reader. Mira was all economy of motion, dark hair tied back, faceplate lifted, eyes already tired and focused in a way that made most people answer directly. You dragged one off a bridge before we even reached the target zone, Mira said. He grabbed the wrong day to carry tools. Mira glanced at Ronan's shoulder. You tore something. Not enough to matter. It matters if I need you walking first in another hour. Ronan did not answer. Mira read that as permission and pressed 2 fingers along the shoulder seam until Mira found the spot that made him tighten his jaw. Small strain, Mira said. You can keep pretending you're fine. Ronan looked past Mira to the intake benches. Workers sat in lines with the same hollow posture he had seen in deep extraction colonies before. Their muscles looked dense and overworked in some places, wasted in others. More than one worker had tremors in the hands, even while sitting still. "What are you seeing?" Ronan asked. Mira lowered her voice. People pushed past safe adaptation thresholds. Joint degradation, cardiac stress, neurological drift. Not from one accident. This looks patterned. From gravity loading, from something they're using to keep bodies working in gravity loading. "I need records." Ronan watched a local medic wheel a cart of injectors under a tarp marked with a neutral supply code. Would they have records here? If they are stupid. A woman on the second bench reached for Myra's sleeve. Mira turned immediately and crouched to listen. The woman spoke in a low rush, pausing twice to cough behind her mask. Mira asked 2 short questions, then looked back at Ronan. She says people sign extra work contracts for adaptive treatment because they cannot keep up otherwise. After that, they stop seeing the same doctors. Some come back stronger for a while. Then they break fast. Ronan felt the mission tilt under his feet. Up to this point, the job still sounded like a hard extraction in a hostile place. Now it sounded like someone had built a system and hidden it behind the weather. Director Selvek Dorn was a resource official. Resource officials did not get grabbed from a remote Deathworld belt over routine graft. They got grabbed when signatures made ugly systems legal or illegal systems profitable. Mira stood. "I know what you're thinking." "What am I thinking?" "That the hostage is not the center of this." Ronan looked to the line of workers, then toward the checkpoint tower where Vex people controlled every gate. "I think the hostage is part of the machine." Myra's expression sharpened. Not offended, just testing. "You say that because he is a director. I say that because people like him do not come here in person unless the paper matters more than the ore." Mira held his gaze for a beat. "If we find civilians in immediate collapse on the way in, I stop. If we stop at every fire, no one leaves this belt alive." "So that is your answer?" "That is math." Mira looked away first, but not like Mira had lost the point. Mira sealed the faceplate and moved to the next patient. By the time the Alliance team reassembled, Vec Turon had new transit clearance and a route revision ready. Vec presented it on a portable projector with smooth patience. "Intersector roads are unstable after a shear surge. We will divert through maintenance transit and reach the detention annex where Director Dorn is being held." Captain Saren crossed her arms. "Detention annex?" The first file said executive housing lockdown. Vec gave a tired shrug. Conditions changed. The director attempted unauthorized movement. "We relocated him for safety." Ronan watched the projection map while Vec spoke. The revised route cut through a low-service corridor beneath a processing ridge, then climbed a narrow spine marked in local code as temporary load path. Too much had changed at once. Ronan let Vec finish because the lie was usually in the middle, not the edges. "This corridor is bad but passable," Ronan said. "This climb is wrong." Vec smiled thinly. "The climb is monitored. The climb is a sheer funnel." Vec's expression did not change. "It is the only open access." Ronan met Vec's eyes. "No, it is the only access you are offering." The checkpoint plaza went quiet for one breath. Local guards shifted grips on rifles, and Sergeant Pell's squad mirrored them without raising weapons. Captain Saren stepped in before the silence hardened. "We take the route with adjustments." Ronan walks point at the climb. Marshal Turon's "people fall back 10 meters from our lead file." Vec tilted his head. "You distrust us." Captain Saren did not blink. "I distrust this planet. You should too." The route descended through maintenance tunnels cut into basalt and reinforced by old support rings that creaked under shifting loads. Condensation ran down mineral-stained walls and pooled in shallow channels where dust turned to black paste. Ronan moved first with a lamp on low power and one hand trailing near the rock, feeling vibration changes through glove padding. Behind Ronan came 2 escorts, then Captain Saren, then Mira and the rest of the Alliance team, with Vex people following farther back than they liked. The tunnel opened onto the climb Vec had marked. It was a narrow external service bridge bolted between 2 processing towers, suspended over a split ravine where conveyor systems moved crushed or in slow belts far below. Wind pushed mineral grit through the open lattice and tower lights. flickered with each distant surge. Ronan stopped at the threshold and listened. Not with his ears first. With boots. With teeth. With the bridge cables humming in staggered notes instead of one. Ronan turned his lamp toward a maintenance panel and saw fresh tool marks near the access latch. Someone had been here recently. Ronan raised a hand for halt. Captain Saren came up beside him. Talk. The cycle here was altered. Not natural drift. Can we cross? Yes. Not on the timing they gave. Behind them, Vec's voice echoed from the tunnel. What is the delay? Ronan ignored Vec and crouched by the first support anchor. A small indicator on the panel blinked local maintenance status, but the casing had been patched and resealed badly. Ronan did not need to open it to know the routing was dirty. Ronan looked at Captain Saren. Whoever touched this wanted the bridge to hold just long enough for a group to commit. Sergeant Pell cursed softly. Vec stepped closer despite the agreed distance. My engineers stabilize these paths every day. If your man wants perfection, we will still be standing here when the sheer front returns. Ronan stood and faced Vec. I do not need perfection. I need 30 seconds without a rebound trap. Vec spread both hands again. Then take your 30 seconds. Ronan watched Grit move across the lattice, counted pulses, tracked lag between tower flickers, then nodded once. Leave 4 across now. Stop at midpoint braces. Do not run. Sergeant Pell started to object, but Captain Saren cut him off with a sharp gesture. They moved. Ronan walked first, each step placed on reinforced ribs instead of wider plates. The pull changed halfway across and tried to drag Ronan's left leg sideways, exactly where a less experienced walker would have planted harder and gone over. Ronan shifted with it and kept going. The first file reached the midpoint braces. Ronan held up a fist. Wait. The bridge shuddered. A second pulse hit from below and to the right. One of Vec's local guards, farther back than ordered and stepping onto the bridge to assist, lost footing when the lattice snapped sideways. The guard collided with Sergeant Pell and nearly took Pell over the edge. Pell slammed into a brace and shouted. Ronan spun, crossed 3 ribs in 2 strides, and caught the local guard's harness line before it peeled. Through Pell's grip. The next pulse was the rebound, heavier and more vertical. It tore a cargo panel loose behind them and sent it spinning into the ravine. The team froze. Ronan locked the harness around a brace post, shoved Pell back into position, and looked toward the tunnel mouth. Near is called, Ronan said, almost to himself. Captain Saren heard him. Who? Ronan kept his eyes on the bridge and answered fast. Route control broker from the file annex. Infrastructure balancing. This looks planned, not field chaos. Vec's face went still in a way that looked, for the first time, genuinely unreadable. You seem very informed for a contractor. Ronan let the local guard collapse safely onto the lattice and turned back toward the far tower. Not informed enough. They made the crossing in staggered bursts and reached the far tower with 2 damaged kits, 1 twisted support panel, and no dead. That was probably not the outcome the trap had been built for. Inside, the far processing sector, the air smelled of hot stone and chemical scrubbers. Conveyor shafts ran overhead, and low utility vehicles moved through side bays under armed watch. Ronan saw workers glance at the Alliance team, and then look away too quickly. Fear always had a direction. Here it pointed inward, not toward the planet. A service tech in stained coveralls paused near a valve station as they passed. The tech kept the head down, but the eyes flicked once to Ronan, then to a side door marked sample transfer. The look lasted less than a second. Ronan slowed just enough to note the door code and the patch on the tech's sleeve. Black Rift Biohandling. They were almost at the inner gate when alarms changed pitch across the sector. Not a full emergency tone, but a controlled reroute signal. The sort used to move personnel without saying why. Captain Saren checked a tablet. Route update from local command. They're diverting us again. Ronan did not need the tablet. The floor vibration had already changed. Somewhere ahead, heavy locks were cycling. Ronan looked at the dark side door the tech had glanced toward. Then at the reroute arrow now blinking over the main corridor. 2 paths. One official. One hidden. The mission had stopped being a clean rescue run. If they kept following local arrows, they would keep arriving where someone else wanted them. Captain Saren saw it in Ronan's face. Say it. Ronan looked down the corridor where Vex guards were already motioning them forward. If we follow that arrow, we walk into their timing. If we take the sideline, we lose formal cover. Captain Saren's eyes narrowed. Which keeps us alive? Ronan listened to the tower hum one more time and answered. The sideline. For now. Captain Saren made the decision immediately. Reroute. Hell, cut us in. Move. They hit the side door before Vex people finished reacting, and the hidden corridor beyond dropped them into the underworks of Black Rift, where the rock itself carried the sound of machines and something else. Movement. Not random movement. Heavy transport moving under guard. Ronan paused in the dim and touched the wall. The vibration pattern did not match a stationary detention annex. It matched a convoy. Director Selvek Dorn was not being held in one place. Dorn was being moved, and that meant timing mattered more than the original rescue brief. A distant lock slammed shut behind them, and Underworks lights shifted to low red. Someone had noticed their choice, and someone else had planned for it. Karen Vale pulled at Ronan's knees. The tunnel air hissed through old vents, and Ronan felt the trap widen beyond the bridge. This world was not the weapon. It was the room the weapon was built in. A narrow transfer tunnel carried them into worker quarters behind the processing blocks, where pressure doors were older, lights dimmer, and local security thinner only because fear did most of the work. Ronan moved at a controlled pace through cramped passages lined with stacked sleeping pods and repair lockers welded shut years before they should have been replaced. Every few turns Ronan paused, touched a pipe, run, or wall seam, and rechecked the pulse rhythm in the stone. Captain Saren kept the team close. Status. Ronan listened to a deep thud pass through the floor. Heavy transport convoy on a lower lane. Heading inward. Not detention. Likely administration or secured archive. Director Dorn? Likely. Sergeant Pell checked the rear line. And local security? Ronan glanced at the dark intersections. Everywhere we do not want them. The team cut through a maintenance hatch and entered a communal corridor where workers gathered around a dead heat vent, some sitting, some standing, all too tired to act surprised. Their eyes tracked Alliance armor, then stopped on Ronan when they noticed Ronan moving like someone who had lived under bad gravity before. Mira stepped ahead before anyone else spoke. We are medical support. Who needs immediate help? A man near the vent laughed, once without humor, and coughed into his sleeve. Everyone. Mira crouched beside an older woman whose hands shook so badly she had to pin one wrist under the other to keep still. Ronan took in details while Mira worked. Dense calluses over knuckles and palms from load tools. Pressure bruising around knees from support braces. Needle marks clustered along the same veins on several workers. Not random treatment. Repeated procedure. Mira scanned the woman's pulse and looked up through the faceplate. Pattern is consistent. Stimulant adaptation plus load tolerance support, maybe hormonal regulators, maybe worse. Bodies are burning out. The older woman caught Myra's wrist. They said it was voluntary. They said we could stop after the ridge season. Mira leaned closer. Who said it? The woman looked toward a sealed corridor at the far end, where a clean white stripe marked access above ordinary workers' sectors. Bio office. Contract office. Same people now. Ronan stepped toward the stripe and read the worn stencil near the corner. Sample transfer. Authorized personnel only. Another deep vibration passed below, closer this time. Convoy still moving. A young worker with a torn sleeve stepped from the wall and spoke to Ronan in a low voice, eyes on the floor. If you're looking for the director, they moved someone under heavy escort through lower transfer less than an hour ago. Not to detention. To the ledger side. Ledger side. The young worker pointed two fingers toward the white stripe, and then farther inward. Hollow side, where paper becomes law. Captain Saren came up beside Ronan. Can he take us there? The worker flinched before answering. If Marshal Turan's people see me, I vanish. Ronan looked at the corridor and then at the worker's boots, patched with local repair resin and dusted with pale powder from inner processing, not outer hall lanes. The worker was close to records or sample transit, just as the sleeve patch suggested. What is your name? Tuvan Eris. Ronan nodded once. You show me the first turn, then you disappear. Tuvan hesitated, then pointed to Mira. Take her too. People in the lower lanes are collapsing. Some can still move if someone tells them what is happening. Mira looked at Ronan. It was not a challenge this time. It was the same argument from the clinic, now backed by bodies, witnesses, and a moving convoy. Ronan checked convoy rhythm again through the floor. If Dorn reached the signing chamber before they found the ledger route, the mission shifted from rescue to aftermath. If they ignored the workers here, they lost witnesses and left people to die in silence. Ronan made the call. Pell takes 2 and stays with Mira for 10 minutes. No longer. Stabilize who you can and get names. Captain goes with me and the rest. Sergeant Pell frowned. We split again in this maze. Ronan looked Pell in the eye. We split because they expect 1 spear. Give them 2 problems. Captain Saren spoke before Pell could answer. Do it. They moved fast. Tuvan led them through utility passages hidden behind stacked filter housings and maintenance cages, then stopped at a grated overlook above a lower transfer lane. Tuvan pointed through the bars. Below, a convoy of sealed transports rolled under heavy local guard toward an intersector gate. The central vehicle had executive shielding and a signal scramble hood over the roofline. Not prison transport. Controlled witness movement. Ronan watched the formation and counted escorts. Too many for 1 reluctant official and too few for a public relocation. That meant secrecy mattered more than force projection. Captain Saren spoke quietly. We intercept here. Ronan shook his head. Bad geometry. Too much open lane. They pin us from both ends. This was the point where the mission could break in 2 directions. A direct hit might rescue 1 man and lose the proof. Tuvan pointed to a maintenance shaft on the opposite side. That climbs to the ledger sublevels. If they're taking him to Hollow Ledger, they need to register biopackets before entry. There's a choke station. Ronan turned to Tuvan. Why help us? Tuvan swallowed once. My sister signed the adaptation contract. For extra pay. She came back stronger for 1 month. Then she forgot my name for half a day and laughed at it because she was afraid. They moved her to special care after a shift collapse. No one lets me see her now. Ronan held Tuvan's gaze for a beat and nodded. Go. Tuvan disappeared into the worker corridor without another word. Ronan led the team into the maintenance shaft, which climbed through old basalt reinforced by steel ribs and humming gravity compensators that sounded strained. The pull shifted every few meters, never enough to throw a train body, always enough to tire it faster than expected. By the 3rd ladder segment, even armored escorts were breathing hard. Captain Saren climbed beside Ronan at 1 landing and said between breaths, Your math is getting expensive. Ronan kept moving. It gets worse before it gets useful. They reached the choke station just as the convoy below passed under it. Through a grated floor, Ronan saw local guards halt the central transport while 2 technicians in clean biohandling suits scanned sealed cases from the rear compartment. 1 case slipped when the pull changed. The technician swore and grabbed it with both hands. A side screen flashed a case label for less than a second. Adaptive labor cohort metrics. Ronan felt the mission center lock into place. The rescue was still real, but now he knew what the rescue was attached to. Director Dorn had not been dragged here to pay ransom. Dorn had been brought to witness and legitimize a system. The hostage scene was the front door. The contract was the real room. Ronan gestured to Captain Saren and pointed at a narrow service route branching away from the choke station. Hollow Ledger Path. How sure? Their convoy stops here for biopacket registration, then continues inward. They are building legal cover and medical cover together. Same chain. Captain Saren studied Ronan, then the convoy. If we miss Dorn now, we may not get another clean angle. If we hit the convoy, we die in a box and learn nothing. If we hit the ledger side, we can still reach Dorn and stop what they need Dorn to sign. Captain Saren exhaled once. Move. The ledger sublevels were cleaner than worker sectors and colder than extraction lanes, as if temperature control itself was a status marker. White paneling covered the rock, cameras sat in recessed mounts, and doors were labeled in consortium legal language that tried to make coercion sound procedural. Evidence, staging. Contract review. Medical compliance archive. Ronan hated places like this more than open battlefields. Open battlefields at least admitted what they were. A faint metallic tick came from the ceiling. Ronan stopped the team with a raised hand. Another tick followed from farther ahead. Then a low vibration rolled through the floor, a fraction too evenly to be natural. Back wall, Ronan said. They pressed into alcoves, just as a gravity pulse hit the corridor in a narrow, directional wave. The floor pulled hard toward the left wall for one breath, then snapped down. A free tool from one escort's belt tore loose and smashed into the paneling. Sergeant Pell stared at the dent. That was targeted. Ronan looked up toward a ceiling access panel and saw a fresh seal line. Nearest called again. Route broker. Quarter loads. She's steering traffic, not just tracking it. Captain Saren checked a tablet now flooded with local access denials. Local systems just revoked all temporary movement codes. We are unauthorized in every intersector. Sergeant Pell gave a humorless grin. So now we are honest. A short burst message hit the encrypted team channel, weak and distorted through sub-level shielding. Myra's voice came through between static. Ronan, Ilya, listen. Workers in Quarter Block 7 confirm adaptive contract program. They call it load extension treatment. We have names and symptoms. Also hearing that Halden RHYSS declared emergency labor law. He locked transit and posted a capture order for off-world interference. Captain Saren swore softly. Ronan replied, "Can you move?" "We can move. We also have a problem. They're sealing air support to lower worker lanes and sections. Pressure is dropping in old dorm blocks." Ronan closed his eyes for half a second. There it was. The first true cost lever. They had proof beginning to form, and the people running the system had made the civilian sectors part of the battlefield. Captain Saren heard Myra's update and spoke into the channel. "Hold your position. Stabilize who you can. We are pushing inward." Myra's voice came back sharper. "If they cut airflow in those blocks, hold position means watch people fail." Ronan answered before Captain Saren could. 10 more minutes. We need the center. If we take the center, we can break their lock sequence." Static, then a long breath on Myra's line. 10 minutes. The line died. Sergeant Pell looked at Ronan. "If she's right, people die while we chase paper." Ronan looked down the corridor where hidden pulses were coming from. "If we miss the paper, people die slower and nobody can prove why. Then, the same system restarts next cycle." No one liked the answer. That did not make it less true. They advanced through 2 more corridors, timing movement between directional gravity pulses. Ronan mapped the rhythm in his head and began to see the pattern. The traps were not random kill fields. They were herding tools, pushing intruders toward camera-heavy intersections and away from blind service lanes. Near's cult wanted them seen in certain places. That meant Near's feared where they might go if left unguided. At the next junction, Ronan ignored the obvious passage toward executive transit and cut through a maintenance crawl space behind a legal archive wall. Sergeant Pell complained until the wall on the other side opened into a dark cross corridor with no cameras and a direct line toward a secured vault ring. Captain Saren gave Ronan a short look that was almost approval. Useful guess. Not a guess. People who trust systems hide, seems where workers are not meant to look. The cross corridor ended at a reinforced door with 2 broken locks and 1 working console. The panel displayed restricted consortium access and a queue of pending contract packets awaiting witness verification. Witness verification. Dorn was ahead. Ronan crouched by the panel while 1 escort set a jammer on low output. Ronan did not try to crack code like a systems expert. Ronan watched the pulsing load meter tied to the door frame and waited for the next artificial gravity trap to cycle down the adjacent hall. When it hit, the door stabilizers compensated, drawing extra power from the same local circuit Nearest was using to pulse the corridor. The meter dipped. Ronan pointed. "Now." Sergeant Pell drove a breaching wedge into the lower seam and forced the lock before the load recovered. The door opened with a scream of metal and a spray of cold air. Inside lay a staging chamber lined with sealed cases, legal tablets, and bio-sample carriers. Each case bore matching transfer codes, adaptive labor metrics, compliance waivers, risk acknowledgement forms, medical tolerance certificates. Mira had been right. Worse than right. This was not a rogue clinic. This was a machine built to turn harm into signatures. Captain Saren moved to a central terminal. Can we copy? Fast copy only, an escort said. Too much data. Ronan scanned the room and found what mattered more than bulk records. A transport manifest. Still open on a side station. Director Selvek Dorn. Witness status. Transfer to Hollow Ledger Vault. Signing chamber preparation. Scheduled within the hour. Ronan sent the location to Mira with a short burst and looked at Captain Saren. The hostage is on site. They're about to force the contract through. Captain Saren nodded once. Then we stopped the signing. A voice came through the chamber speakers, calm and almost amused. You are further ahead than expected, Captain Saren. The room lights brightened to full white. Ronan looked up. Nira's call appeared on a wall display. Pale-faced, sharp-featured, hair pulled back so tightly it made the expression narrower. Nira's wore no armor, just a clean systems coat and the composure of someone who believed distance was protection. You chose the seams, Nira said, eyes moving to Ronan. I wondered if you would. Captain Saren stepped toward the display. Drop the corridor traps and stand down local security. Nira's blinked once. You misunderstand your position. Marshal Turin handles force. Provost RHYSS handles law. I handle balance. At the moment, balance requires that you arrive late, not dead. Sergeant Pell raised a rifle toward the screen out of pure irritation. That can change. Nearest ignored Pell. Ronan Vale, is it? Your file was thin. Contracted expertise. Prior extreme environment work. Several redactions. Ronan met Nearest's eyes on the screen. You are pulsing directional shear through legal corridors to manage foot traffic. That is not balance. That is a hunt. Nearest tilted the head. A hunt assumes malice. I am optimizing outcomes. Whose outcomes? The ones that keep Caronvale producing. The speakers clicked off before Captain Saren could answer. A second later the floor dropped under them by half a meter as a deep pulse rolled through the vault ring. Sealed cases burst from shelves. One escort went down hard. Terminal screens went black, then flashed emergency reroute warnings. Ronan slammed a hand on the central table to avoid the wall. She's changing the rules. Ronan felt it immediately through the floor and table edge. The pulse pattern was different now, tighter and layered. Not natural shear. Engineered shear. Somewhere below, someone had switched on a deeper control net. Captain Saren got to her feet and grabbed the table edge. Can you still read it? Ronan listened as another pulse struck from above and behind. Impossible under local geology alone. Not like before. This is artificial shaping. That meant the floor itself could be scripted in key corridors. A bad world was now a guided weapon. They were no longer just moving through a hostile planet and a corrupt mine. They were moving through a weaponized gravity system built by people who had studied adaptation and turned it against human movement. The next corridor nearly killed them. Ronan led the team out of the staging chamber into a service spine that should have connected to Hollow Ledger's outer vault ring. Instead, the floor under the first two escorts snapped into a lateral pull so strong it threw them into the wall before the warning tone sounded. The pulse vanished after one breath, then returned from a different angle. Engineered shear. Ronan dragged the nearest escort clear before the second hit and shoved the team into an equipment recess. A maintenance cart tore loose from magnetic clamps farther down the hall and smashed into the opposite wall in a burst of shattered panels. Sergeant Pell stared down the corridor. What is making that? Ronan listened to the rhythm, then to the gap between pulses. Anchored field nodes deep in the structure. Not enough to change the planet. Enough to shape the hall. Captain Saren wiped dust from the visor. Can Nearest do this everywhere? No. Too much power. Nearest can do it where it matters. Captain Saren looked ahead. Which means where we're going matters. Ronan nodded. More than a hostage. They moved in bursts timed to the engineered pulses. Ronan could no longer rely on natural cycles alone, so Ronan started reading control intent instead. Nearest pulsed on predictable intervals whenever the team entered camera coverage, then widened intervals in blind segments as if trying to push them toward formal checkpoints where local security could contain them. Ronan began choosing spaces nearest seemed to care about least. At a broken junction gate, they found the first sign of the second direct force. These were not local mine guards in matte black. This was a disciplined strike team in darker segmented armor with compact shields and non-lethal shock launchers tuned for capture on high-mass worlds. The formation was tight, professional, and built for detention, not firefights. Strike lead Oryx stood at center, helmet on, visor mirrored, weapon low and ready. Oryx raised one hand. Captain Saren, Ronan Vale, Consortium Authority, has issued detention orders. Surrender, and no further injury occurs. Sergeant Pell laughed once. You came with launchers to promise no injury. Oryx did not react. This facility is unstable. Your movement is creating risk. Ronan watched foot placement and shield spacing. Oryx's team had trained on gravity variant floors, not locals, brought in for this phase. Ronan spoke to Oryx. You are not here to protect a signing. You are here to escort one through resistance. Oryx turned the visor toward Ronan. I am here to finish the night. Captain Saren signaled the team to spread into cover. Then we are late for the same appointment. The first exchange was fast and ugly in the way close corridor fights always were. Oryx's team fired shock rounds into floor and walls to force body movement under heavy pull, then advanced behind shields in short steps. Captain Saren's escorts returned fire at joints and emitters while Sergeant Pell flanked through a utility recess. Ronan did not shoot first. Ronan watched pulse rhythm, counted 2 engineered shears, and saw Oryx's team unconsciously trust the same safe interval in the third cycle. They had drilled the pattern nearest gave them. Ronan slammed an emergency load switch on a wall panel just before the third cycle completed. Local stabilizers overcompensated for half a second, and the corridor pull shifted off the program line. Oryx's lead shield man planted too hard on what should have been stable floor and slipped. That break in the formation gave Pell a lane. Sergeant Pell fired, hit a launcher's emitter, and forced the strike team back behind cover. Olhux recovered fast. Oryx pivoted, ordered 2 operators to pin the flank, then drove forward through shifting pull like someone who had lived under worse. Oryx was good, and Ronan admitted that in the same instant Ronan moved to stop Oryx. They collided at the corridor bend where the floor dipped. Oryx hit with controlled force, trying to shove Ronan into the next pulse lane instead of striking center mass. Capture doctrine. Preserve the target if possible. Ronan used the planet. Ronan gave ground 1 step, then shifted weight into the coming lateral pull and dragged Oryx half a pace off balance. Pell's shout echoed behind them while Captain Saren's team held the rear line. Corridor lights flickered with each pulse. Oryx drove an elbow toward Ronan's shoulder, catching the strained joint and forcing pain so sharp Ronan's vision blurred. Ronan bit it down and hooked Oryx's wrist against the wall rail just as the next engineered pull hit. Both men slammed sideways. Oryx's grip broke for a breath. Ronan used that breath to shove Oryx backward into Oryx's own shield line. Move! Captain Saren shouted. They broke contact and ran the opposite corridor before Oryx's team could reset. Shock rounds struck walls around them. One escort stumbled when a pulse clipped the legs, and Ronan hauled the escort upright without stopping. By the time they reached a sealed service hatch and dropped the lock bar behind them, everyone was breathing hard and one escort was limping badly. Captain Saren looked at the injured man, then at Ronan. How many more of those can we take? Ronan listened to the deep hum vibrating through the hatch. Not enough. Sergeant Pell tore off a damaged shoulder plate. Then maybe we stop chasing the director and leave with what we copied. Captain Saren looked at Pell, then at the partial data module, then at Ronan. Before Captain Saren could speak, the team channel hissed with Myra's voice. We have witnesses. Names, treatment schedules, missing family logs. Also bad news. Emergency labor law is live. Halden RHYSS is pushing public notice that all adaptive workers are bound to remain on site until contract review completes. Ronan replied, while checking the hatch seam. How close are you to upper transit? Not close enough. They sealed 2 lanes and posted capture teams. Mira paused, then added in a lower voice. Ronan, one more thing. A worker from biohandling recognized Director Dorn's transfer route. He says Dorn signed a first phase halt weeks ago. That is why they took him. Dorn blocked expansion. Captain Saren closed her eyes for one beat. There it was. The shape of the mission changed again, and this time there was no doubt. They were not only preventing a bad contract, they were stopping the forced reversal of a halt. If Dorn signed under duress, the consortium could call the program legal again and bury every injury under paperwork. Ronan looked at the limping escort, the damaged corridor, the partial data, and the timer in his head. Leave now and survive with fragments. Push forward and maybe lose everything. Ronan thought of the woman in the clinic line who said they laughed because they were afraid. Ronan thought of Tuvin's sister, hidden behind a contract label. Ronan thought of Vec calling the weather uncooperative while sending them onto a trap bridge. Captain Saren broke the silence. We keep going. Sergeant Pell opened the mouth, then shut it when Pell saw Captain Saren had already made peace with the cost. Ronan nodded once. Then we stopped playing their route. Ronan pulled an emergency maintenance map from memory and pointed at a dead utility spine under the hatch panel. There's an old gravity service line beneath this sector. If the artificial shear grid is anchored to the ledger ring, that line feeds or monitors it. We cut through there, not to outrun them, to see the system. Captain Saren studied Ronan. You're guessing again. Ronan looked at the shaking hatch as another pulse rolled through. No, I am following the people who think they can script a planet. The service line was worse than legal corridors in every physical way and better in the only way that mattered. No cameras, no polished surfaces, and no official routes. Just raw basalt, aging support nodes, and maintenance rails wrapped around gravity anchor housings that throbbed with control power. Ronan crouched beside the nearest housing and pressed a glove to the casing. The vibration was layered. Natural shear underneath, artificial correction above it, and a third signal spike every few seconds that matched corridor pulse intervals. Nearest was not shaping the facility blindly. Nearest was using a distributed anchor net tied to local stabilizers. A system that complex had a weakness. It needed sync. Captain Saren watched Ronan read the casing. Can you break it? Ronan shook his head. Not all of it. Not with what we have. Can you break enough? Ronan listened again and, for the first time since landing, saw a path that did not depend on perfect timing. If we overload one cluster during a transfer spike, the fake stable lanes fail too. Their teams lose the floor with us. Sergeant Pell gave a grim smile. I like plans that make everyone miserable. Ronan looked at Pell. Then you will enjoy this one. They moved deeper along the service line until it opened into a maintenance pit overlooking a larger anchor chamber. Through a grated catwalk, Ronan saw 3 primary field housings linked by thick conduits, all feeding the ledger ring and adjacent. Signing sectos. 2 technicians in clean suits worked consoles under guard. The guards wore Oryx's strike armor. Captain Saren whispered, "Too many to take quietly." Ronan pointed to the conduits. "We do not take the room. We spike the load." "With what?" Ronan looked at the damaged shock launcher emitter Pell had torn off earlier and the portable jammer on an escort's belt. "With their tools." Pell looked almost offended. "That should not work." "It should not. We only need it to work once." The setup took less than 3 minutes and felt much longer. Ronan and Pell wired the damaged emitter into a conduit access panel, while an escort tuned the jammer into a crude oscillation pulse under Ronan's direction. Captain Saren positioned the team on 2 catwalk angles to cover retreat. Below, one technician looked up, frowning at a console. Ronan waited for the anchor load to crest. Ronan could not read the numbers from here, but Ronan could feel the chamber hum rise in teeth and knees. "Now," Ronan said. The escort triggered the jammer. Pell kicked the panel contact closed. The damaged emitter spat a warped shock pulse into the conduit, not as a weapon, but as noise. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the nearest anchor housing screamed. Lights blew out across half the chamber. The floor pull vanished, returned, and then split in two directions at once as sync failed between clusters. Guards below staggered. One technician slammed into a console. Another grabbed a rail and lost a tablet to the air as the chamber shifted. Ronan did not wait to admire it. Move! They ran. Behind them, alarms changed from corridor warnings to systems failure tones. Ledger ring lights flickered. Through the wall, Ronan felt artificial pulse, timing collapse into irregular bursts. Nearest still had control somewhere, but not the smooth control needed to herd both intruders and escorts. For the first time all night, the field was messy for everyone. Captain Saren checked the team channel while running. Mira, status. Static, then Myra's breath. We heard something big. Lower locks opened in 2 worker lanes. People are moving. Good, Ronan thought. Chaos cut both ways. But chaos carried cost too. At the next junction, they found it. One escort had not recovered from the earlier corridor hit. When a sudden pull jerked the floor downward, the injured leg buckled and the escort went down hard against the wall. The escort tried to rise and failed. Captain Saren and Pell grabbed the escort together and hauled the escort into cover while Ronan checked corridor rhythm. Irregular, unstable, dangerous in ways no longer easy to predict. Captain Saren looked at the injured escort's readout and then at Ronan. He cannot keep the pace. The escort shook the head, angry at the body. Leave me a sidearm and keep moving. Sergeant Pell snapped back. Not happening. Ronan listened to the building and made the call Ronan had expected. We split by speed now. Saren takes 2 and the data copy toward the signing chamber. Pell takes the injured man and 1 escort through worker transit to Mira. I draw the strike team off the center line. Captain Saren stared at Ronan. Alone. You need the center and a clean line. Oryx wants me more than the others. Let Oryx chase. Pell shook the head. That is not a plan. That is bait. Ronan met Pell's eyes. Yes. Captain Saren's jaw tightened. Captain Saren did not like it, and Captain Saren knew it was right. 3 minutes. If you're not on channel in 3 minutes, I assume you are dead and finish the objective. Ronan gave a dry line because the team needed something lighter than the truth. If I am dead, make sure they spell my name wrong in the report. Pell barked one short laugh despite everything. Captain Saren almost smiled, then the moment passed. They split. Ronan took a narrow upper corridor toward the legal transit ring and made enough noise for trained pursuers to follow. Ronan saw the first strike team shadow within 30 seconds. Oryx's people moved carefully now, no longer trusting the floor. Good. Ronan led them through 2 bends and then down an old service stair where natural shear still dominated over the broken artificial grid. Here Ronan had the edge again. The pulses were ugly but honest. Oryx caught up at the base of the stair, stepping into the open with only 1 shield man beside Oryx. Enough, Oryx called. The contract signs with or without you. This only changes how many bodies we carry out. Ronan kept moving backward, 1 hand on the rail, eyes on Oryx's stance. If that were true, you would not still be chasing me. Oryx's visor tilted. You think too highly of your role. Ronan felt the next natural pulse build in the stair frame. No, I think you were told I know where the ground breaks. Oryx advanced on the next stable beat. You know where it breaks for humans. Ronan almost missed the meaning because Ronan was already timing movement. Almost. Then Ronan heard it. Oryx knew more than he should about the adaptation program. Not just operationally, personally. Training modifications. Gravity-conditioned reflexes. The consortium had not only experimented on labor. The consortium had built elite units around the same logic. Ronan let Oryx close another step, then moved on the wrong beat on purpose. Oryx committed instantly, predicting a stumble. The natural shear shifted diagonally instead of downward and grabbed the stair rail harder than the floor. Ronan used the rail pulled to swing clear. Oryx planted for a downward surge that never came and slammed shoulder first into the inner wall. Not enough to end the fight. Enough to open distance. Ronan ran and keyed the channel. Ilya, Oryx unit uses adaptation training. They read human gravity habits. Do not repeat patterns. Captain Saren's voice came back between gunfire pops and static. Noted. We are at outer chamber. Dorn confirmed inside. Ronan's chest tightened for one breath. Equal parts relief and urgency. Can you stop the signing? Not yet. We have partial lock on one door and no legal kill switch. Then another voice cut into the channel. Smooth and public even through interference. Halden, RHYSS. Captain Saren, your continued trespass now constitutes interference with emergency labor stabilization. Withdraw, and your personnel will be released to off-world review. Captain Saren's reply was ice. You are forcing signatures under armed confinement. RHYSS answered without heat. We are preserving critical infrastructure and worker livelihoods in extraordinary conditions. Director Dorn's participation is voluntary. Ronan nearly laughed at the audacity of the lie, but Oryx's team fired down the corridor and drove Ronan into cover before Ronan could answer. Ronan risked a glance and saw Oryx back on Oryx's feet, moving slower now, more cautious. Good. Caution cost time. Ronan fired twice to keep the corridor narrow, then cut through a side gate marked obsolete maintenance. The passage dropped Ronan into a broad underfloor crawl route beneath the signing chamber ring. Through vents and service gaps, Ronan heard muffled voices above, then the heavy thump of door charges from Captain Saren's team. Ronan found a ladder to a side service hatch and climbed until Ronan could see the chamber through a grated panel. The signing room was smaller than Ronan expected and more theatrical. White stone walls, sealed glass partitions, and a central table with legal tablets and biometric pads. Director Selvek Dorn sat restrained in a witness chair, face pale, suit torn at one sleeve, with two strike guards behind him. Halden RHYSS stood at the table in clean formal wear as if hosting arbitration instead of coercion. Near his cult worked a side console with furious focus. Dr. Sarah Malkin stood near a bank of biosample cases, watching everything with detached alertness, already treating casualties as variables. And on the far side, above the room on a secured display channel, a new face appeared in crisp detail. Consortium Rient Val Kurin. Older than Ronan expected. Controlled. Expensive calm. The kind of person who did not need to raise a voice because systems did it for him. Vale's image looked toward the room, not knowing Ronan watched from the service hatch below. Proceed, Vale said. We are past acceptable delay. Halden inclined the head. Director Dorn has become difficult. Dorn lifted the chin despite restraints. I suspended the program because your numbers were falsified. You're asking me to legalize injury. Dr. Sarah Malkin spoke for the first time, almost gently. We are asking you to preserve a labor population that cannot survive output collapse. Adaptation has costs. So it does abandonment. Dorn turned toward Sarah, anger cracking through fear. You hid those costs. Nearest did not look up from the console. Arguments later. The field net is unstable. We need this done before another sync loss. Ronan keyed the channel low. Ilya, listen. Full room in sight. RHYSS, Nearest, Sarah, Dorn present. Vale Corin, on remote. Nearest is keeping the chamber stable through the anchor net. If we break sync again during the signing, they lose floor control. Captain Saren's voice came from just beyond the chamber wall. We are one door away. Pell, and Mira. Static then Mira. We are moving civilians through an open lane. We can send witness confirmation to any clean channel if you make one. Ronan looked at the biosample bank and legal tablet array. This was the center. To save Dorn alone would not be enough. To expose the chain, they needed witness voices and proof of 4 signatures tied together in the same moment. Vale spoke again, each word measured. Director Dorn signed the continuation review. Your objections can be appended. Delays are causing instability and unnecessary risk. Ronan forced the plan into order. First break chamber stability. Then pull Dorn clear. Then push proof out before they can rename the event. Ronan looked at service controls under the hatch and saw a maintenance bypass feeding the chamber's local gravity compensator. Nears had likely locked it, but locks were slow under stress. Ronan only needed a fault. Above, Halden placed Dorn's hand near the biometric pad. Ronan exhaled once and tightened grip on the service tool. Time was over. Sequence began. Captain Saren blew the outer door on the same second Ronan shorted the compensator bypass. Chamber lights strobed white and red. A loud crack ran through the floor as the local stabilizer lost sync with the already damaged anchor net. Gravity inside the room split sideways for a breath, tossing legal tablets off the table and slamming one strike guard into partition glass. Ronan kicked the service hatch open and hauled into the chamber from below while everyone else was still orienting. Oryx was there too, entering through the far inner door with 2 strike operators, faster than Ronan wanted and exactly when Ronan should have expected. The room became motion and noise at once. Captain Saren's escorts fired from the breach. Oryx's team returned controlled bursts meant to pin and disarm. Nearest shouted to restore sync. Halden ducked behind the central table. Sarah grabbed a bio case instead of a weapon. Ronan went straight for Dorn. A strike guard lunged to stop Ronan, but the next gravity shift hit under the left side of the chamber, and the guard planted on what should have been stable floor. Ronan shoulder-checked the guard past the witness chair, ignored the flare of pain in the strained arm, and ripped the restraint latch free when the lock failed to compensate during the pulse. Dorn sagged half out of the chair, disoriented. Ronan grabbed Dorn's collar and hauled Dorn upright. "Can you stand?" Dorn blinked through strobing light. "I can sign less than I can stand." "Good. Then stand." Across the room, Oryx and Captain Saren collided near the legal table, both trying to control the same line of advance. Oryx drove hard, using shield weight and gravity-trained footwork. Captain Saren yielded one step, then cut Oryx's angle with a table slide as another pulse split the floor. Oryx was not just trained. Oryx was engineered around the training logic. Ronan pushed Dorn toward the breech door, but Nearest slapped the command strip on the console, and emergency shutters began to drop over the exits. Nearest looked up and saw Ronan. "Stop him." Dr. Sarah Malkin moved in, not with a weapon, but with a portable injector unit and a data key. Sarah sprinted toward the bio bank, likely to trigger a purge or lockout. Myra's voice hit the team channel at that exact moment. "Ronan, I have witnesses queued. I need a channel. Any channel." Ronan looked at Vale Corrin's live remote feed, still open above the chamber. The cleanest channel in the room was the one the consortium trusted most. Ronan shoved Dorn into cover beside the breach and fired 2 rounds at the wall display mounts. One missed. The second shattered a support and dropped the Vale feed panel to a lower angle, sparking but still live. Oryx looked up. Halden cursed. Nearest shouted in pure anger now. Ronan keyed the chamber audio manually from the legal console while the system stuttered. "Mira, send now." Static, then voices flooded the room. Workers. Real names. Treatment schedules. Families separated. Pain, memory gaps, collapse after adaptation rounds. Myra's clipped medical summary rode over the top, clear and hard to dismiss. Multiple civilians with patterned injury consistent with coercive load extension treatment. Repeated interventions. Informed consent, not credible under current conditions. Vale Corrin's image remained on screen long enough to hear all of it. Halden RHYSS lunged for the console to cut audio, but Captain Saren slammed Halden sideways into the legal table before Halden could reach it. Nearest rerouted controls, trying to kill the feed. Ronan saw Sarah at the biobank now, hands moving fast over a purge sequence. If Sarah wiped sample records and treatment metadata, the legal chain could still survive the testimony as confusion. Ronan moved towards Sarah, but Oryx intercepted, catching Ronan at the shoulder and driving Ronan into the side rail. Pain exploded through the same strained joint. Oryx pinned Ronan with shield weight and hissed through the helmet speaker, the first real emotion Ronan had heard from Oryx. "You think stopping one room changes the system?" Ronan gritted teeth and looked at the floor as the next pulse built. "No, I think this room proves it exists. Ronan hooked Oryx's shield rim against the rail latch and waited half a beat longer than instinct wanted. The pulse hit sideways. Oryx compensated correctly for the floor and wrongly for the rail. The latch blew open under load, and both men pitched into the adjacent walkway. Ronan rolled, came up on one knee, and kicked the shield free before Oryx could recover. Across the room, Myra's testimony feed was still live, now joined by Tuvin's voice, shaking and furious. My sister signed because they said she would get hazard pay and treatment. After the third round they moved her. They told me she was unstable. They will not let me see her. Vale Corrin's image flickered, but did not disconnect. That told Ronan what Ronan needed. Vale still needed to control the narrative, which meant Vale could not simply black out the room without admitting fear. Dr. Sarah Malkin slapped the purge command on the biobank. Nothing happened. Myra's voice came over the channel again, thin with interference and effort. I piggybacked their med relay. Purge requests are queued behind emergency triage tags. You have maybe 1 minute. Ronan almost laughed despite everything. Mira had found a way to hit the system where it hurt. Sarah turned, saw Ronan, and for the first time lost attached comm. You do not understand what output collapse will do here. They die either way. Ronan answered while moving toward the biobank. Then you should have asked them to choose with the truth. Sarah raised the injector unit like a weapon, then stopped when Dorn spoke from the breach, louder than before. I ordered the halt because I saw the truth, Doctor. You buried it. Sarah's face changed then, not into remorse, but into the look of someone whose argument had failed in public. Sarah dropped the injector and reached again for the console, desperate now to salvage classifications. Captain Saren fired a short burst into the console housing. Sparks erupted. The purge screen died. Oryx, bleeding through a split seam at the neck seal, regained footing and looked from Vale's still-live image to workers' voices flooding the chamber. For the first time, Oryx's posture shifted from mission completion to extraction calculation. Oryx keyed the team. Fallback route. Now. Halden RHYSS shouted at. Oryx, you're under contract authority. Hold this room. Oryx turned the visor toward Halden. Contract conditions changed. Oryx motioned remaining strike operators toward the inner exit. They covered the withdrawal professionally, still dangerous, but no longer trying to reclaim the signing. Ronan let Oryx go. The objective was not Oryx. It never had been. With the chamber unstable, testimony live, purge blocked, and Dorn free, the center of the battle shifted. The legal stage was broken. Now the urgent work was keeping people alive long enough for proof to matter. Captain Saren knew it too. Captain Saren yanked Halden RHYSS upright and forced Halden toward the live audio pickup. State your name and authority. Halden spat dust and tried to turn away. Captain Saren slammed Halden's hand onto the legal table where the failed contract still glowed on a cracked tablet. State it. Nearest was still trying to recover systems from the side console, but without sync and with chamber controls damaged, Nearest could only watch the collapse of the sequence. Vale Corrin's image remained on screen, colder now. Captain Saren, transmit your evidence package and stand down. Further action will be interpreted as sabotage of critical infrastructure. Ronan helped Dorn to the breach while listening to the room groan under unstable pull. There was the offer. Preserve the structure, negotiate later, and bury deaths in committees. Ronan looked at Captain Saren. Captain Saren looked back and saw the same thing. No, not later. Here. Myra's voice came in again. Ronan, I have workers in a safe lane and recorded testimony bundles ready. I can send to Alliance Relay if you open any off-world path. Ronan scanned the chamber and found the emergency comm spine feeding Vale's remote link. Nears had kept it alive because power in this room served legitimacy before safety. Ronan ripped the panel open, traced the live line, and bridged Myra's testimony packet to the same outbound path, still carrying Vale's feed. Nearest saw Ronan and lunged too late. You cannot route raw civilian statements through executive arbitration traffic. Ronan did not look up. Watch me. Ronan forced the send. The line stuttered, surged, then locked. Data transfer bars climbed across 3 screens at once, mirrored on the legal table and the damaged wall display. Witness names, medical tags, transfer logs, partial sample record from the staging chamber, chamber audio, and the failed contract timestamp. All moved out on a channel no one in the room could later call unofficial. Halden RHYSS sagged when Halden saw it. Vale Corrin's image watched the progress bar without expression. Then Vale spoke one last time. You have won the room. You have not solved the belt. The feed cut. The room suddenly felt much smaller without Vale's voice. Captain Saren released Halden and keyed the team. Objective update. Contract signing prevented. Primary witness secured. Evidence transmitted. New priority is civilian stabilization and extraction to defensible sectors. Sergeant Pell's voice crackled back, rough and relieved. About time. Worker lanes are a mess, but moving. We can hold a route if gravity stops arguing. Ronan looked at the floor as another pulse rolled through. Weaker now. It is still arguing. Just not for them. They evacuated the signing chamber in staggered files, taking Dorn, Halden, and what physical sample cases they could carry without slowing the line. Near's cult disappeared during the movement, slipping into a systems crawl route while everyone else focused on the failing floor. Ronan noticed too late and filed it away without chasing. The room was won. The belt was not. Dr. Sarah Malkin stayed under guard, silent now, watching workers' testimony continue to echo through emergency speakers and broken snippets as damaged systems failed to mute it. In the workers' sectors, the night widened into a different kind of fight. Without the consortium's clean sequencing, local locks opened unevenly. Some dorm blocks vented pressure alarms. Others regained partial air support. People flooded transit lanes in weighted boots, carrying children, medical kits, tool bags, and whatever mattered enough to lift under heavy pull. Mira moved through them like a line of force, directing the weak toward stable chambers and the strong toward manual pump stations. Ronan found Mira at a junction where old filtration towers met a cargo lift shaft. Dust caked Mira's sleeves, and the voice was hoarse. "You look terrible," Mira said when Mira saw Ronan. "So do you. Good. That means we are both still useful." Ronan helped Mira guide a stretcher team into a safer lane and then asked the question Ronan had held since the chamber. "How many did we lose in the lower blocks?" Mira looked at the moving crowd before answering. "Too many injuries. Fewer dead than I feared. The lock failure opened lanes early when your anchor stunt. Broke their timing." Ronan nodded once. Not victory, just a smaller loss than the system wanted. Director Dorn sat against the support wall nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket, one wrist bruised from restraints. Captain Saren stood over Dorn, while Sergeant Pell coordinated escorts along the transit spine. Halden RHYSS was under guard on the opposite side, formal coat torn, face gray with anger and calculation. Dorn looked up at Ronan. "I know what you think of people like me." Ronan crouched to check a floor pulse map scratched in dust by a local maintenance worker, then answered without looking up. "I do not have one thought for all people like you." Dorn gave a tired, bitter half-smile. "That is more generous than I deserve. You halted the program. Late." Ronan finally looked at Dorn. Still not nothing. Dorn's eyes moved to workers passing through the junction. "I signed its first review phase because the numbers I was given looked survivable. They were not real numbers. When I learned the truth, I froze expansion and ordered an audit. That is when I stopped leaving this planet alone." Captain Saren cut in, practical as ever. "You can give the full statement off-world. For now you walk when we move." Dorn nodded. "What about the workers tied to the contracts?" Mira answered from the stretcher lane. "The contracts are not the only problem. Even if the paper dies, bodies are still carrying the cost." Dr. Sarah Malkin, under guard a few meters away, spoke quietly. "There are taper protocols." Everyone turned to Sarah. Mira stepped closer, eyes hard. "Then you're going to write them down in plain language and say which patients crash first." Sarah held Myra's gaze for a long moment and then nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was utility under pressure. On Karen Vale, utility could keep people breathing until ethics caught up. The next hour blurred into hard work and ugly logistics. Ronan helped stabilize route timing across 3 transit lanes by reading natural shear and marking safe intervals in chalk and scraped dust, while local maintenance workers who hated the consortium but loved survival worked beside Ronan without ceremony. Pell's team held choke points and redirected panic crowds. Captain Saren coordinated with a delayed Alliance relay once Myra's data bundle forced outside attention onto the belt. Word spread faster than official orders. The contract failed. The director lived. Testimony got out. That did not calm people. It changed what they were afraid of. By the time the first off-world oversight shuttle signaled approach windows, Karen Vale's false comm had broken for good. Some local security units stood down when they realized Halden's legal cover was collapsing. Others vanished into side sectors. Marshal Vec Turun never reappeared in Ronan's line of sight, though twice Ronan heard reports of organized withdrawals from positions that should have been defended to the end. Vec was not a fanatic. Vec was a survivor of systems. Vec would choose the next employer before dawn. At the Central Transit Hub, Captain Saren assembled what remained of the team plus civilian medical volunteers for the final push to anchor Port 9. The route was longer than the way in and safer only because Ronan now trusted no declared safe corridor at all. Ronan walked point again. This time no one argued. The march out was not a triumph. It was tired bodies under a hostile sky, carrying the injured, guiding workers, and stepping around wreckage from a night that exposed more than it fixed. Gravity shear still rolled through basalt spines. Dust still flashed in floodlights. Karen Vale had not changed its nature because humans fought over contracts on its surface. But the people running the belt had lost the clean sequence they needed. At a ridge crossing near dawnlight, if dawn could be called that on a world like this, Ronan paused the column and held up a hand. The pull shifted, then settled. Ronan marked the next safe steps with a line of chalk. Mira came up beside Ronan with a medical sling over one shoulder. Your shoulder is worse. It will complain for a week. You should let it. Ronan glanced at Mira. Is that medical advice? It is an order I am too tired to repeat. For a moment, they stood listening to wind, drag, mineral grit along the railings. Then Mira looked at the civilians behind them, at Tuvin walking beside a stretcher where a woman with half-shaved treatment ports slept under blankets, and back at Ronan. We did not save everyone. No, we still changed who gets to lie about why. Ronan looked at the dark ridges ahead. That matters. Mira nodded once. No more needed. At Anchor Port 9, the port had become a holding ground of arrivals, inspectors, medical triage tents, and suddenly cooperative administrators. Captain Saren handed custody chains to Alliance oversight officers with enough witnesses present to make alteration costly. Halden RHYSS demanded legal representation before the second question and received it. Dr. Sarah Malkin spent 3 straight hours dictating taper protocols and treatment dependencies under Myra's supervision and looked 10 years older by the end. Director Selvek Dorn gave the first formal statement on record while seated because the legs still trembled. Dorn did not excuse himself. Dorn did not try to disappear behind procedure. Ronan respected that, even if respect was not trust. Sergeant Pell found Ronan near the edge of the landing field, watching loaders move emergency filtration units toward the outgoing civilian transport queue. Pell handed Ronan a sealed ration pack, probably stolen from Better Box. You left me with a slow route and an injured man, Pell said. Ronan took the pack. You handled it. Pell shifted weight and looked toward the busy field. Yeah, we all did. Pell hesitated, then added in a lower voice. About before. The comments on the ship. Bridge. Everything. I was wrong. Ronan tore open the ration seal. That is dangerous. Do not make a habit of it. Pell barked a laugh and shook the head. There is your humor quota for the week. Captain Saren approached before Ronan could answer. Armor scratched, one gauntlet patched with field tape, but Captain Saren moved with the same controlled authority as when the mission began. Alliance Command wants you available for debrief, Captain Saren said. Ronan looked at the field. They can wait 15 minutes. They are waiting already. Captain Saren paused, then added quieter. The evidence package landed hard. Vale Corrin's office is denying intent, and offering emergency relief funds. Which means they are scared. Ronan bit into the ration and looked out at Karen Vale's dust bands crossing the far ridge. They should be. The belt still exists. Captain Saren followed Ronan's gaze. They asked if he would stay on temporary advisory status for stabilization. Ronan swallowed and shook the head. No, thought so. Captain Saren handed Ronan a slim data chip. What is that? Copy of the public release package and local witness index. Sanitized enough for transport. Also a note from Mira saying if you leave before Mira rewraps your shoulder, Mira will hunt you. Ronan looked at the chip, then at Captain Saren. And you note, Captain Saren almost smiled. You were right about the math. Do not let it make you unbearable. The debriefs took the rest of the cycle and drained Ronan more than the corridor fights had. Too many clean rooms, too many careful questions, and too many people trying to separate systems failure from coercive design as if words could lighten the planet's pull. By the time Ronan was cleared to depart, Anchor Port 9 had settled into the kind of order that looked efficient from orbit and felt temporary on the ground. Workers were still being treated, investigators still arriving, and the belt's power structure had cracked, not vanished. Ronan preferred honest cracks to polished lies. Ronan boarded a transport off Karen Vale with one duffel, a patched shoulder, and no interest in cameras. Mira caught Ronan at the ramp anyway, and shoved a fresh wrap kit into Ronan's hand. You leave this on for 2 days, Mira said. Then move the joints slowly. If you ignore me, the next high-gravity world gets to hear you complain. Ronan took the kit. I do not complain. Mira gave a flat look. You compress your face in silence. Same thing. Ronan nodded toward the loading field where Captain Saren spoke with an oversight team and Dorn was escorted to another shuttle under guard. You staying? For now. They need med triage more than another argument. Mira hesitated, then added, if you take another contract like this, ask one question before you land. What question? Mira met Ronan's eyes. Who benefits if the weather gets blamed? Ronan let that settle and gave the smallest nod. I can remember one sentence. Good. That saves your shoulder from carrying more. Ronan started up the ramp, then paused and looked back. Mira. Mira waited. You were right at the clinic. Myra's expression shifted, softer but still tired. So were you. That was enough. On a better world, maybe they would have said more. Karen Vale had trained everyone here to spin words where they changed outcomes. The shuttle lifted under controlled strain, clearing Anchor Port 9 by a margin that made the pilot mutter at the instruments. Through the small port window, Ronan watched black rifts, ridges, turn into dark seams under stormlight. Somewhere down there, workers were still moving through lanes Ronan had marked in. Chalk. Somewhere nearest Cult had disappeared into another system. Somewhere Vecturon was deciding which story to sell next. The case on Karen Vale was closed in the only way a case like that ever closed. The contract had failed, the signing had been stopped, and the evidence was out. The people at the center had names on record and choices narrowing around them. The planet kept turning. Hours later, once the shuttle reached a relay station and Ronan finally had a quiet berth, a secure packet appeared in Ronan's queue with no sender tag and a route signature scrubbed too clean to be ordinary. Ronan let it sit for a full minute while berth lights hummed and the shoulder wrap cooled the skin. Then Ronan opened it. Inside was a simple index file. No greeting, no threat, and no demand. Just a list. Contract continuations. Adaptive labor programs. Deathworld extraction belts across multiple systems. Different consortiums. Different legal fronts. Similar language. Similar witness clauses. Similar emergency stabilization provisions. Karen Vale was on the list, marked now with a new status line. Failed. Ronan stared at the rows while the station's artificial gravity held steady, gentle, almost generous after the planet below. Whoever sent the packet did not want Ronan to revisit the same fight. Whoever sent it wanted Ronan to understand the shape of it. Karen Vale was not a side story and not a sudden new case dropped from nowhere. Karen Vale was one exposed segment of a larger machine. Ronan closed the file, sat in the quiet berth, and listen to the ship's soft vibration through the frame. Not a hostile world's shifting pull, and not a corridor trap. Just machinery doing what it admitted it was built to do. For the first time in 2 days, Ronan let the eyes close. The night on Cairnvale was over. The next problem, whatever it was, had not started yet. If the story stayed with you, then maybe it touched something real. Not just a fight on a hostile world, but a question that follows us everywhere. What do we become when survival is used as an excuse, and who still stands up when the cost becomes personal? Ronan did not save a perfect world. He did something harder. He stopped a lie long enough for the truth to breathe. And sometimes that is where change begins. If you felt that journey, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves thoughtful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more long-form sci-fi stories that are built to pull you in and stay with you. Thank you for listening. I'm glad you were here.